All right, out there, how you doing? We're here again with another episode of Don't Talk Politics. I'm Tahuti,
Sundiata.
and today we're gonna, I guess, delve into uh, all blacks are criminals, tough on crime, politics. Um, I guess we basically are saying that because of the criminalization of our image, we are conditioned to accept inferior treatment, characterizations of violence, and it justifies the abuse that we suffer. Recently, the cop that took the life of George Floyd was recently bailed out, and I believe it's just another attempt to manipulate our people into some sort of reaction as a result of another slap in the face, another injustice, another spitting in our face, basically. Like, what are you going to do? And it always boils down to power. So we're looking at the criminalization of our image. And what are the sources of that criminalization? And then how is that used politically against us and our interests and our attempt to gain power? So, Sundiata, you want to delve into any part of this while we get started?
Yeah, so we're going to look at the historical framework of the criminalization of black people. And like you said, the characterization was very important. If you look at Europeans on how they view the world, they characterize the other. And they have a history of doing that. If you look at how they look at Muslims and they see them as a fanatical religious type, even though they themselves can be fanatical. If you look at how they look at the Chinese and saw them at one time as being sneaky and underhanded, the yellow peril and all this other stuff. And they had movies that would portray this. So they're constantly first giving an image, as like when they first encountered us in Africa, even though we gave the world civilizations, and even though they themselves even said how peaceful it was, they pushed the narrative that we were savages and we were heathens. So we're going to see how that savage and heathen gave birth to thugs and hoods to the point where at least the Africans are fighting that image. For us, because they have us totally controlled 360 degrees, we actually embrace those images that they will eventually use to further their gains. Because at least back then, the Africans weren't saying, yeah, I am a savage. Now you have black people saying, yeah, I am a thug and I'm proud of it.
Right.
Not realizing
I'm embracing
they're embracing it and not realizing that's furthering the
stereotypes
and the dominance of white people over black people.
Of course. I agree totally. And then when we look at the terms that are used and associated with the psychological processes involved with this, they came up with the term ethnocentrism and Eurocentric and Eurocentrism and Western. Now they buzz it as Western or Westernized or Western civilization and things of that nature. Again, it's a division. There should just be civilization, period. And you study civilization.
Right.
And then that begs or brings up the question of what is exactly civil and civilization. If you go to the foundation of civilization, to me that defines as living in a peaceful environment. But if you trace the history of Europe, of the ancient times, even in the Roman and the Greek and stuff, it's always tracing war from one war to another war to another war.
Right.
And they talk about great civilization. When in Greece, for instance, there were just city-states. One would war against the other. Sparta would war against Greece, and then Athens. And you had all of these warring independent city-states that couldn't even get along.
Right.
And yet they claim to be the foundation of these higher thought philosophies, which you can't produce in a state of war.
As a matter of fact, Sparta would found it valuable if a child was able to cheat or fight or steal. They would actually reward that child because in their worldview, we're always constantly trying to one up the next person. We're all constantly trying to maneuver so we could take something from the next person. And it's too bad because of African children or black children in America, when you talk to them, they really believe that we gave the world that thought of thuggery. When actually you've been thugged upon and you've accepted it as a mode of behavior. Because, like you said, the Roman and Greece and those city-states, they prided themselves on the fact that they could still kill at will and put people into a different type of slavery, which we'll talk about later.
Right. So when we go to the foundation politically, let's look at that now. We're looking at some of these movements and strategies. Like we spoke in a previous episode of the Southern strategy, which
very important, yeah.
Basically it just solidified the racial divide and the targeting of black people as a springboard to bring in racists to the Republican Party,
right,
by denying the rights of black people, be they civil rights, human rights, or godly rights, any right of dignity. These Southerners and Northerners and anti-progressives look to deny that.
Right.
And so they found a nest,
right,
a home with
right.
a welcoming arm with the Republican Party.
Right.
And then from that, you had the launching of the psychological campaign that was designed on attacking the image. If you look at this time, we're talking about the end of the mid to late 60s on into the 70s. And you saw that America was shook up by the power exhibited by our people in their determination to be free, and their determination to have justice and righteousness. So with that determination, it shook them. Because they were in a propaganda war for the control of global dominance. And with that, they went and said, well, we may not be able to do nothing with this group right here, but let's start working on their children. Let's start working, and what is our strategy for doing that? So then you begin to get the propaganda with the different movies celebrating like the Mac and Superfly and all of these things that taught the youth to be a hustler and go after the money.
Well, first, I was going to say, too, because I was going to say, let's go over the Southern strategy even further. Let's get deep into that. And because like you said before about World War II and the New Deal, that's when they remember they started doing stuff for us in the country. So that's when the Democratic Party really started changing its face, the New Deal, and especially under Truman when he integrated the troops. So then that gave the so-called Southern Democrats, that made them angry, as though, okay, we're losing our country. You guys are doing too much for them. Right. And so when we look at that, it's very important, because I heard Joe Collins actually on the radio, I think it was last night, and he was, and it's so much. They're unknown. I would say ignorant, because people see it as a wrong word.
Well, who's Joe Collins is the
Republican running against
Maxine Waters.
And the guy interviewing him was like, he was saying, well, we were Republicans. So, and he wasn't so much pro Joe Collins, but he did kind of added that, well, it's cool you're running because as Republicans, because we were Republicans once. People always say that, but like you say, they never look at, no, just because you claim to be that you were once, that you're not looking at how the party evolved into this monster that really harmed us, and that it started after the Democrats under Truman. And the Democratic Party almost, it did break up. So what happened was those Dixiecrats were created when they saw them integrate the military after World War II. And they were only doing that because Cold War was just starting to heat up, and they were trying to win the hearts and minds of people around the world. And we don't learn anything about world history, so we don't really, we don't understand how it affects internally. So when America was under pressure to appear to be democratic, because remember, Hitler just exposed white supremacy to the world, and everybody was trying to run away from it. They didn't want to be called a white supremacist because Hitler said the white race, the Aryan race, the white race. So people were running away from that. So America said, okay, hey, we got to look better before the world, because they're going to say, hey, you guys look so much like Hitler, because Hitler whispered to Jesse Owens, how does it feel to compete for a country that treats you like crap?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So even he saw the contradictions, like, oh, y'all talking about me, but we basically doing the same thing. And people forget Hitler had a picture of Henry Ford in his office. Hitler was a big supporter of Henry Ford.
And so was IBM. We can get into all of
Oh,
those.
and IBM and all. So therefore, they had to create this line of separation because you have Lindbergh and the Kennedys, even father, who praised Germany.
Right.
So they said, okay, now that Germany looks so terrible, we have to appear to the world that we're integrations. But as they were doing that, the Democratic Party started to break up. Okay. And you actually had 3 different parties at one time.
Right.
And then it solidified itself, and blacks rushed to it. And when they did that, all those Dixie Democrats, like you're talking about the 1960s, said, forget that. We're going to be going to the Republicans. And then they had Barry Goldwater as the mouthpiece who said, yes, we're going to make sure this is a white-run country.
With that, and they have never abandoned that.
Never.
That's our point.
Never.
Is the power has never abandoned that it's going to be a white-ran country, and it's going to support white power, and that's white supremacy.
Exactly.
So, you have to define things for yourself. You have to look at it through your lens and not someone else's, and that's what we're moving toward. So, these images of criminalization, how did they manifest later on with the propaganda, with the movies, with the so-called war on drugs? Tough on crime. I'm tough on crime, and I will be tough on crime. That was Richard Nixon.
Right.
But he declared a war on drugs. And it was a code word with you implementing this Southern strategy.
Right.
A war on the image of black people.
Right.
Because to this day, black people are not disproportionately drug users in this country to this day. But that image is propagated, portrayed to give the impression, just like the welfare mother, when we know that
whites are on welfare more,
way more.
Yeah, and then what they had an issue with was after the '60s, black youth had won the world over to black humanity. Because black people, especially under Martin Luther King, was seen as this brother like who was put together morally, and he was going against the immoral American system and these immoral American people. So you were juxtaposing him against Bull O'Connor and other things,
right?
And you're able to see that. Wait a minute, you guys are vicious. Here's this guy, this beautiful brother who can speak, who just wants his rights, and you are not only attacking him, but you're attacking all these beautiful children in the street. So that beautiful children image, like you just said, they said, you know what? We're going to attack these children, and by the time the world looks at them again, they will see them
as monsters. As monsters.
As monsters.
That's what they're going to do.
And then those children became even more radical in terms of the Black Panther Party, who weren't trying to kill whites. As a matter of fact, they worked with whites in Appalachian Mountains. Those poor whites. Those poor whites, they said, look, you poor, we poor. We may not like each other, but let's come together, especially Fred Hampton before he was murdered in
But
Chicago.
let's show them how that strategy they study, how they study and strategize regarding that. Because if you look at now, they try to wrestle the morality, saying that the Christian right, the Christian moral value, the Christian this, that all was in reaction to those seeds that were laid that you spoke about in the 60s, where Martin Luther King and all of these religious figures were seen as the moral authority of the nation. So now they try to wrestle that moral authority, saying that they're pro-Christian ways, but there's nothing truly moral about their practices. And if you look at the practices, these so-called conservative practices, look at these incarceration rates. But our problem is the image of tough on crime is both Democratic and Republican. It's both the Democrats and the Republican that embrace this image and try to get brownie points based on how tough they are on crime. In other words, on how well they oppress black people. If you had that image, you can bring that image up of the first one, and we can talk about that. This image here represents it's a mosaic of Kamala Harris, and yesterday they had a debate, and they tried to bring up her record on crime, and her different roles as she basically flaunted the role of being the first this and her first black or woman of color of that of the Democrat district attorney for the state of California, and different aspects. But these men that make up this mosaic represent not just the men that she put in prison. These are the ones that were refused release after their release date because they were serving and working so well for the profit machine of the prison industrial complex that they were denied their release date, even though they had worked for their release and were entitled to it, extended under Kamala Harris. So we have to bring these points up because, contrary to popular belief, slavery does exist in this country. In the 13th Amendment, it only states that slavery shall not exist except for as punishment for a crime being duly heard by a judge and jury, X, Y, and Z. And then the bottom line is the incarceration rate. I think that's the second one. You can bring that one up. The incarceration rate in this state under Kamala Harris, it's ridiculous. It's not even comparison. It's over per 100,000. It's 3,000 plus per 100,000, if I'm recalling correctly. And even in that, we're saying there's more incarceration rates than COVID. If you're gonna pass from COVID, it's around I don't know 70, 80, 100 maybe per 100,000 in the population now for our people. So we're showing the mass numbers, and it's not even comparable to the other groups. And people say, well, what does that say? That shows you the criminalization of our image.
Yeah, and then surprisingly, she'd be supported by Trump, who on the East Coast was himself saying black men are predators. We need to kill them and lock them up. And the same mentality, because both parties have the same thinking. It's hard for our people to really grasp this, because at the same time, the Southern strategy. Oh, and also the Southern strategy had in it. It said although they were going to attack the black image and throw out code words like welfare queen and housing and busing to really galvanize white people around racism, because they couldn't say nigga anymore because it was unpopular around the world, also really. But it was unpopular, so they said we have to give these code words. At the same time, they said we're going to go get, though, a certain slice of the black population that doesn't care for their people. That's Republican parties. This is their own words.
They recruit them.
They're recruiting, and they said we're going to go to the churches with faith-based money and get them, because they came to Howard University and they knew that and it wasn't just the university children; it was also everybody. But they said we will appeal to a certain group of black people who won't care that we're going after these black people and targeting them. And so I think it's very important when we start looking at this to understand that we have been a political football, a ping pong that goes back and forth between two parties. And this, we have to really realize, if you look at the history of it, that once again, to say that now because Kamala is a Democrat, she did all this crazy stuff, and Biden is a Democrat, did all this crazy, that now we're going to jump to the Republican Party, we'll be making the same mistake that we've been making since 1860s.
Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing the same way and expect different results. I mean, all of the while that we've been voting, we've been oppressed economically all the while. We've been voting. We've been miseducated. We've had ill health. We've had problems being employed. We've had economic hardship. We've had social. We've been shot by the police. We've been killed by the police. We've been lynched. All of this while voting.
No, you're right. Because ill health, you say, just think about the statistic that we always talked about, the babies. Is it, CNN, not CNN. Now we're not talking about our publications. We're talking about their publications. Say a black baby is 3 times more likely to die if they have a white doctor. They didn't say a Republican doctor.
They didn't say a Democratic one.
A Democratic doctor. They said a black baby is 3 times more likely to die if they have a white doctor. And for all my black friends who are telling you, oh, no, it's not about race and we don't want to blame people and all this other stuff. Why do the numbers say that? The numbers are hardcore, and it says that the race of the doctor is critical to that innocent, vulnerable black child. And it's our position that they've been working on us since integration, since they brought out movies like Superfly. And they've been working on us to the point that we don't want to be discussing race anymore because we feel
We're
that
afraid
that's
of it.
passe, or we feel that that's radical, or we feel you hate somebody else. No,
Doesn't make you hate.
CNN just came out and said if you have a black child, you better look at the race of the doctor. And,
Right.
and they did not say, like I said, it's a red state or blue state. They said overall. That's very important for us to look
Yeah,
at.
could you pull up the I think the third one or the fourth one, the one on the pandemic for us, so we can just show some of those. It's up now. Okay, good. Like if you look at these statistics on the rate of deaths in pandemic, we're again far and above our percentages in the population.
Right.
And my question is, most of these people, you know, the big debate, the topic was the pandemic, and they're
Right.
talking about the handling of the
Right.
the pandemic.
Right.
My question is, if our group, if he looks at these statistics and sees that our group, black people, are dying disproportionately, our group, black people, receive disproportionate health care related to it, could that be the shaping of the attitude why he has such a cavalier attitude about corona in the first place? Because the number one group that is suffering from corona are black people. The number one in terms of percentages.
Right.
So when we look at these, and then we're talking about death. Now, when we're talking about life or death situations, it should get real for everybody, but it doesn't. And so you have a country that's arming themselves for, I call it racial Armageddon. Why are all these groups weaponizing, militarizing, tactical training, taking babies 4 and 5, 7 years old out to shooting ranges, have targets that look like us, you know, to shoot at,
Right.
all across this country. And you don't have to go any far. We just drove the other day and saw a big parade with flags and "Don't tread on me" and all this other stuff. And Jesus is my savior, and Trump is my president, my Lord. We saw all of that. Just driving not even 40 miles outside of L.A.
Right.
So with these statistics, what is these training, this militarization, this state of readiness say to our people who are being criminalized and who are being targeted and who are being psychologically prepared for slaughter?
Well, yeah, again, it's one of those things, once again, that because we don't look at the history and we don't look at really what's going on around us. When the United States government, the FBI, said that they know for the last 10 years, white supremacist organizations have been infiltrating the police and the military. And we really still don't get that because we aren't taught. Our whole experience in America is governed by white voices. You can't go to your preacher and hear this because he's worried about the tithing and he's worried about faith-based money. You can't go to your teacher and hear this because they're worried about tenure and being fired by the superintendent.
Unless it's me.
And you know, and you can't go, and then you can't go, especially to your politicians, and they really have a real serious talk because for them, their money will dry up and they won't be backed by either one of the two parties. So we don't really understand that when we're in America, you're in a box, and to really step outside that box, which is really what this show is really about, getting you to step outside and looking at the third option. You have to step outside and look at this for what it is. History has shown us repeatedly, and it's very interesting, these Trump supporters, when they come and they say, you know, you start really drilling them and talking to them. And, you know, we love them because we understand that their interest is to free us, but we just can't have a love or our interest to be freed. We have to have a knowledge of information on how to be freed. There's a whole saying, and it says that, you know, the art of war. It said you study, if you know your enemy, if you know yourself and the enemy, you have 100% chance of winning. If you know yourself and not the enemy, 50%. But if you know not yourself nor the enemy, you're going to lose every battle. And you start talking to people and they have no idea in terms of how we got to where we are and how serious the people arrayed against us are in terms of wiping us off the planet. And, you know, because that's the issue.
And I think, you know, our final slide, and we're going to go to the phones. Feel free to call in. I forgot where's my slide. It's the one on the U.S. tops. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is showing guns in the country, and when you look around, actually globally, and when you look at this, what you have to see is how far and beyond the United States is in terms of guns in the country. I mean, they talked about it, and I believe you mentioned earlier the statistics of arming that's included in the attitudes of people towards arming themselves and being prepared. But when you look at the global list of countries with the most firearms, the United States has, per 100,000, 128,000 plus guns. That's more than one gun per person.
Yeah, they pass them down generation. Yeah.
Say that again?
They pass guns down to generations.
Yes.
And that generation buys new guns. Yeah.
Now, some of these other countries, as you mentioned, that they call radical, like Yemen and these other countries, they're not even in the ballpark in terms of weapons.
No, they're not
but
the
yet
violence.
These are the violent societies
Right.
because of imagery and weaponry.
Right.
Now, we're not pro anything. We're not pro violence, but we are pro self-defense.
Right.
And we look at these numbers, and it's telling us, it's a telltale sign on why this fear has been infused in this country.
Yeah.
And the fear of us is an unnatural fear, and people act on that. That's why our people are constantly killed without any type of consequences. You know, they let them out. They'll slap on the wrist. They'll pay a couple of dollars. They'll do this, but it does not change anything.
Right.
And we still fail to see what, at the end of the day, when you cast your ballot, if you put Biden in and Biden comes in, he called people super predators.
Right.
He was pro-crime bill.
Right.
He was friends with some of those reminiscents of those Dixiecrats.
Right.
So what's different?
Right.
What's the difference to me? You know, I understand that.
Right.
What is the difference?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is none. And then once again, this is the playbook that Europeans have brought out of Europe. Because if you look at a time when you have the Romans and they were going up against the Phoenicians and they were going up and they're going up against Carthage. And they were saying things like, oh, they sacrificed their children. There was propaganda back then. Yeah. They demonized the people who they want to destroy, and they've learned that early on. And so when you look at the behavior now, they learn to demonize us. And let's go back to what you were talking about before, when the 60s, when those children who had won the world over to their cause. I'm talking about the African and the blacks all over the world. Because remember, the Vietnam leader, Ho Chi Minh, was inspired by Marcus Garvey.
Yes, it was.
And he also in turn inspired George Jackson. And you know, so when you had all this, you had this coalition in terms of freedom fighters who were saying, you know what, you have the same problem, we have the same problem. Like Malcolm X said, we find out we have more in common. The Bandung Conference. We have a lot in common when we're able to close the door and come together. And so when you look at those children in the 60s and how they were able to galvanize the world and say, those children have a point. What is up with this white supremacy that we just finished fighting 20 years earlier in Germany? And then they said we have to create in these children a different type of behavior so they will no longer have the moral authority over us. They will no longer be seen as winners in terms of the global struggle. So then they gave us Superfly, and this is very important.
Hustling.
Superfly is movies. Period are propaganda pieces, and Hitler realized this when
military pieces.
Before he murdered the Jews, he had to create movies that showed the Jews in a certain light, so that it conditioned the population. Right. Even wealthy Jews started looking at their own and say, yeah, you're right, that is the ghetto, because that's where we get the term ghetto from. It's from that.
Jews
it's from Germany. And so when they were able to use the propaganda through the films, they said in the 60s and 70s, in the 70s, when they regrouped, they said, let's release this Superfly. And they had a kit that you could actually buy to make your car look like the character in Superfly. And if you look at the story, the storyline of Superfly, remember, they were already gathering drugs to bring them in. We found out that they did do that. We have all the facts in the record show that we did. Right. At the same time, they're ready to drop the drugs in the black community. They had to fight this love that black kids have for one another. So what they did was they gave you a character who was unwilling or doing it because he had to. It was do or die. Same word that 50 Cent would use 40, 50 years or 60 years later. Get rich or die trying. So he said, I love my people. In the movie, because unlike now, you had to first state your love for your people. Now they don't have to do that. Now rappers can come and say, I hate niggas. You can do like Lil Wayne and not have any connection. Right. Back then you had to have some little connection.
At least fake it.
You had to fake it. So in the movie, the main character had to say, I'm down with you all, but it's all about me getting money. Well, guess what? You speed it up 40, 60 years years later. You don't have to say I'm down with y'all anymore. You could say it's just about getting money. So
just
now
about getting paid.
Now we talk to young people about policies. They said, well, he getting his money. He getting his money.
That's why they celebrate Trump. Now let's bring it back.
So we bring it to Trump. So this rap culture was really and a few of the boxers, but the rap culture especially highlighted Trump and really used him as the model because they are looking for validation, or that's who they're vicariously living through. That's why they want to be Gates and Trumps in their records, and that's why they say I'm Little Capone, because in their mindset,
it's all about that money.
Hollywood was able to pull them from the struggle of being Black Panthers and sacrificing themselves, and really made them understand that no, you want to get that money, even if it kills your people.
Right?
You want to get that money.
They say that it doesn't make a difference in the long run because look what happens. Our people still don't have power. This is the counter argument that they come.
And that was in the movie Superfly.
Yeah, it's in
the movie Superfly. When they came to him, he said, "I'll be down with y'all, but until y'all really get the power, I'm gonna be doing this."
Exactly. And so the points that we're making are the propaganda machine of Hollywood, but Hollywood is joined with the military because don't forget, pre-World War II, your enemy was post World War II, but definitely during and pre, your enemy was the Japanese and the Germans.
Exactly.
And since the war has concluded, your friends are the Japanese and the Germans.
And that's another point. You used to hate the so-called Red Scare. You used to have a Cold War.
They were your allies before.
Yeah, but they hated them. They supposedly they hated them to the point where they were like, we don't want to talk about Russia and all this other stuff. Now you see you warmed up to Trump before you even warmed up to Black people. Everyone, if you think America, you've had enemies in the past that flip sides, but except for us.
Let's bring this point though. Don't forget that even in the debate last night, that Pence was calling Kamala Harris a communist. And Trump is sitting right next to the communist.
Because the code word is not true. The code word is not true. It just triggers. It triggers a response. It's never been true. Those Africans he found were not savages. But if I say savage, that's the code word. So you could switch into now we can kill them. Those Native Americans you found were the peaceful ones. You called them savages. You had Thanksgiving saying they help feed you. But then you turned around. And then you turn around and wipe them out because the code word allows whites to get on code and say, oh, now we know what we need to do. So when he called her a communist, what he really was doing was hearkening back and saying the civil rights struggle when they said the Communist Party is influencing the civil rights struggle. So this is historical. Communist. And they know history and we don't. So we can look at a debate and hear words and not understand that, oh, he's triggering time to attack this black girl right here. It's time to attack this black piece.
And see, so what does that mean? I mean, it pulls back the memory of those of you familiar with Dukakis, who ran against him? Bush Dukakis, the first Bush. He was losing terribly. And then he brings the Willie Horton ad out.
Right. Again,
criminalization. All blacks criminal. Dukakis lets him out and he gets out and he kills somebody. That's who you want? You need somebody that can control these black people.
And the guy who did that admitted that before he died. He died of a brain tumor. And he admitted every single word of it. He said, yes, this is what we were doing. He had already said it in an interview, but before he died, he wanted to get right. So he said, I use Machiavellian tactics. And we, for some reason, cannot see this. I'm just baffled how I can hear a black male say, you know what, I'm a vote for Trump. I'm baffled because it's like, wait a minute. you know, here
But-
is a guy who's openly said it. I will kill 5 black boys. There's no other group of people that a black politician can say, I'm gonna kill 5 Chinese, I'm gonna kill 5 Jews, I'm
And
gonna
you
kill
gonna get
5
their
whites,
vote.
and you still get their vote.
That's
And
not
let
gonna
you know
happen.
how the disconnect
But here-
between. And the
but
sad
here-
part, let me
well,
say this real
go
quick.
ahead, go ahead.
The sad part is that, you know, we've been through so much in the history of this country, and we as black men have been attacked so much that we cannot afford to abandon ship and then say, forget it all, I'm jumping on the other side because I see a little bit of crumbs that I can use. We have been through too much. I was just talking with my wife about our parents and our grandparents. They did not talk about the past because it was so painful. There's a story real quick, I'm going to say that much, but there's a story of Black Wall Street when they were going through killing black people. It was a lady who had a baby, he was stillborn. And during the shooting and everything, she put him in a shoebox and was running because she wanted to be able to properly bury her baby. And as these whites were shooting at her, she dropped the box and she dropped to her knees trying to find it. And her husband grabbed her and said, we got to go. We got to go. They interviewed her. She was 80, 90 years old later on. And she said, oh, that poor child. She never forgot the trauma of what having to go through white supremacy and the hatred of white supremacy. We too strong as a people for our black men to come out here and say they're going to support anybody who has an inkling of anti-blackness. That's what I want to say.
That's good. I mean, you're calling into question black manhood, which needs to be called into question, because when any group concedes that they will allow others to come in and strip, I mean, it's been a castration from day one. Mm-hmm. And the numbers that we are incarcerated at, those rates, the numbers that our children are attacked in schools, those rates, miseducated, those rates, healthcare, those rates. That's a total picture of genocide. And for us not to be defenders, for us to simply try to latch on or attach ourselves to somebody that we perceive as a champion and not summons that champion inside of us, that warrior inside of us, in defense of those morals, in defense of the values, and in defense of your people, is why we are not respected. And it's simple. It's a need for us to attack these images head on, to look at whoever it is, be it a member of our race or a member external to us, whoever does not align themselves with our group's best interests, we have to deal with them. We have to deal with them. It cannot be some, we're going to need everybody under the rainbow movement. That's not going to get this done because nobody focuses on our problem. I think it was Amos Wilson who said, we go to the schools, we speak the language, we solve their problems, we get awards, we get celebrated, but put a problem that's facing our community in front of us. And we're looking to solve their problem again. You can't call yourself educated. An educated people solves their own problems. And we're not solving our problems. Like we said before, voting and all of the techniques that we have employed thus far, we are still in the same position. You cannot tell me, no leader can tell you that by doing what they're asking us to do right now is going to guarantee anything for us. There is no guarantee. There is no movement. There is no security. We're not protecting our children. And you tell our children to watch us do what? To give in to people who ignore us, people who dismiss us. And as soon as this election is over with, everything goes back to you're not addressed, your issues are not addressed, you have no agenda.
Well, the issue and what the problem is the black politicians who come before us after being elected, they clearly tell us, I am not a black politician. I am an American politician. Right. And so they have, from the get-go, have already said this is not about solving our particularly black problem. But when they run for the vote, they tell you, oh yeah, this vote's gonna mean a lot for you all. But after they become elected, they then all of a sudden become a general overall candidate for everybody. So we're saying that if you look at Asian votes at 27%, but you look at the statistics of how successful they are, it is other things that they are doing that we've gotten away from and that we got to get to in terms of taking over our communities. One is we have to take back these schools. We have to take back these public schools that you have a tremendous amount of history with in terms of fighting for our children and fighting these school boards that are taking the resources, not using it for our children, and our children being labeled. That's one thing we have to do. The second thing we have to do is control the images that are coming through the media and stop putting all this worship over actresses and actors who do these terrible performances, such as Halle Berry and Denzel Washington, and then we parade them around. This is not slight against Denzel, but the character he played did not deserve that award. They only did it just to almost
prove a point.
To prove a point. It was clearly to prove a point. Two of the worst roles our black actors have gotten in years, and they give them an award. Once again, it's propaganda that is going on in these movie theaters.
Yeah, you can't buy into that. And
No,
see,
you can't.
and see, you have to define your self-worth yourself.
Yeah.
You got to stop having this need to have the approval of someone else for your self-worth. And I think that is our main issue of self-hate that we have to overcome, because you have to deal with who taught you how to hate yourself.
Right.
We're not saying you get up, you look in the mirror and you start cursing yourself out or mutilating yourself or abusing yourself. We're talking about the subliminal. What is planted, that seed that is deep inside of you.
You so black.
And you come out and you manifest it in your habits and your
and
comments.
flies.
And all of the things that you say, your expectations is that your people gonna be a failure in whatever
Niggas
they
ain't
do.
not-
We
niggas
can't
ain't
trust
shit.
them. We can't
You
trust
know how
each other.
niggas
We can't
be.
we can't build. We can't put our money together. We can't pool our resources. We can't think our way out of anything. What are you trying to say? You know,
Yep.
and those are the things that we're trying to address.
Right.
Your mindset has to be reconditioned.
Right.
From a power standpoint, because we're used to not having power, so we have to learn how to assert power. And when that happens, it's a different playing field. Then you use your intellect to solve your people's interests, and when it doesn't, you don't do that.
That's
And
right.
it's not as there is no compromising your way into freedom, which is what our leadership has been doing. For the past 60 years now.
Right.
We're trying to compromise our way into being liked, and it's not about being liked, it's about being respected. You have two entities that respect each other. They don't have to like each other. The U.S. doesn't like China, but they better respect them. They don't have to like them, and the Chinese don't like the U.S., but there's some respect.
They have
And
power.
they have the power to garnish that respect. Now, how do you develop that power? That is the only question. By 2050, you're going to be a part of the majority in this country.
Yep.
That's just the numbers.
Yep.
And the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand the tactic of believing that every ounce of power that you have is contingent upon the grace that has never been demonstrated by a ruling class towards our people as a group. It's never been demonstrated. I don't care about any placid or trinkets that has been issued out to maintain calm and, as Sundiata said, protect the image broad across the globe so that they can open up more markets to make more profits. That's not what we're talking about. They have never gone against the original edict, which was that we are brought here to make them wealthy and not reap the benefits for our own self and our own community.
Yep. And I'm going to close out by just saying that, encourage everyone to get this book by Amos Wilson, Awakening the Genius, the Natural Genius of Black Children. Get it for young girls who are having babies. Get it for young couples who are coming together. In the book, he talks about stats once again what white doctors were saying in the 60s and 70s when they were weighing black babies against white babies, trying to prove the superiority of white children. They actually found something that astonished them, and that is the development of black children was so far ahead of everyone. And then they found out that this starts to reverse itself at 3 years old. Why 3 years old? Because at 3 years old, you start picking up the messages of society. You start picking up the people around you, what they're saying, all those little sayings about, yeah, we niggas and we some thugs and we all this. The black children starts to their minds start to close up. And it's scientifically proven that when children have inferiority complexes, or children are criticized, or children have a lack of confidence, that their learning actually starts to shut itself down. They shut themselves down. Chemically, they start to shut themselves down. That's right. But so get this book. You can get it at SO1, get it at Malik's bookstore. If you're here in LA, if you're anywhere else around the world, go to a black bookstore and get it or order it online. It's called Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children by Amos Wilson.
Right.
So,
and you got to understand that is scientifically proven. You look at the portion of the brain, amygdala, I think it is called, but it takes over when the sense of attack is there, and we're attacked. Totally. We're attacked in the curriculum. We're attacked, like we said, on the TV screen. We're attacked in movies. We're attacked in society, in household. We're dysfunctional, unbalanced relationships, and the dynamics of the family being destroyed as a target and reinforced by society. So when we look at all of these things, that has a major impact on learning. Has a major impact on self-esteem, and self-esteem is related to mathematics. You don't have the energy to function at your highest capacity. That's right. So when you start solving these problems, when you really address that you are not aspiring to be like the dominant culture of America, but you're aspiring to be a human being. When that takes place, you will see the proper translation into the achievement and the academics and the overall success. And yet, despite all these conditions, we still have people who optimize and perform at the highest levels. And I know that baffles these scientists. When they set up these boxes like the Skinner box and all of these tests like classical conditioning and all that stuff, that wasn't for no rat. Trust me, it was to construct social constructs in society. And it amazes them that we still manage to find genius despite these horrid conditions of oppression and the tactics that are manipulated to make sure that we seek inferior statuses. When we look historically, why is that important? Because the lie that was told about our origin in Africa, the lies that were told about, and many of these people here believe that we are better off here than we were in Africa. They don't know anything about the societies, don't know anything about the science. They don't know anything about the great achievements. And even to this day, they believe what they see on some UNICEF commercial or some commercial that would be the equivalent of going to, say, Skid Row and saying that's the best that LA had to offer in terms of filming. So when we look at these things, understand the power of propaganda, the power of propaganda, and the suppression of your freedom to think, because it shapes that. And once you it's like clipping the wings of a bird. You can't fly but so far when they clip your wings. That's true. And so you can't buy in to this. And we definitely need a reculturalization, and we definitely need a reteaching and a rethinking of all of this historical propaganda that is taking place that infuses white supremacy in curriculum and in practice.
And the people got to realize you're not saying this just out of theory. You know, I mean, you've been in education for over 20 years, 2 decades, and you've seen up close children who they've thrown away and really crushed, and how you had to bring them back. And those children later, one of them, you explained to me, graduated in 3 years from college, and she was totally thrown away. Matter of fact, we're going to have some of them on the show so you can see. So, because I think another big issue, like you've always mentioned in the public schools, the parents come already covering up their children expectations, are already covering up their abilities, already coming and saying, no, I want this child tested. Oh, no, I want this child in the system. Because, and that's shocking to hear all that we've been through. A child is born, gets here, and the parents are the ones who cover them up from your stories that you told. So we have to realize this is not just theory that you're throwing around. This is something you've seen in practical, everyday teaching methodologies,
That's true. That's true. And one of the most disappointing aspects of that is to watch teachers lower expectations for children. Whenever a child is challenging, I would call it a challenge. It's a challenge. How am I going to reach them? It's there. Never will I dismiss that child as being unable to learn, even with disabilities, even with all the different factors that come into impacting them. And we have many of them. Trauma. There's, our homes are traumatic. Our neighborhoods are traumatic often. And so you have to learn how to draw out of that the genius that's in that child that Amos Wilson talks about. And, you have to equip yourself to deal with that. So if you go with the dogma, if you go with the traditional pedagogy, if you're afraid to go outside the box because it's so controlled, you're not there to help those kids. Because there's no way you're going to follow that and help those children, because it's going to further incarcerate their minds. And so my thing is, I'm anti-incarceration. I don't care. I don't like it in the prison system that set it up. I don't like it in the educational system that seeks to feed that prison system by incarcerating the minds. They have statistics that say when we don't learn to read by 3rd grade, they start building prisons. They build prisons based on 3rd grade scores in reading, because they know what the deficit that they have placed on that child, the frustrations that's down the line, and the impact it's going to have. That more than likely that's where they're going.
And I was about to say, and it's not that those children couldn't read. It's the fact that the people placed in front of them did not teach them to read. And that's why our people actually starting to believe that we are inferior, man. I mean, this is how serious this is. This propaganda that we're facing is actually seeped into our own consciousness. So where we look at ourselves and say, well, you know how niggas are, niggas this and niggas that. And we start putting that on our children. So once again, like I said, this is not theory. This is something that who's been fighting. And you think after all this success, he would be rewarded. But when you're going against what a system is designed to do, you're actually attacked.
You're attacked. So, yeah. Yes, you're attacked more than people would actually believe. You're attacked. You're attacked for being an advocate for your own children. You're attacked. But setting that aside, when we look at the final analysis of the criminalization and the political use of it, watch this at the end. You got about 3 weeks or so, maybe 4 weeks left. Watch this at the end. When it comes up to question, they were talking about what Trump won't say. Watch this at the end. He won't denounce white supremacists. He's not. He's not going to do that. And I don't care that Biden or Harris, that they do denounce it. What difference does that make with the practices? And that's all we should be looking at. What are the practices? Those numbers don't lie. I don't care what you call it. I don't care what excuse you make. I don't care what statistic you try to twist. To impact the numbers in that fashion, there has to be something else at work. Numbers don't lie. The disproportionate amount of incarceration in this country, the disproportionate amount of miseducation, the disproportionate amount of poor health care coming to the same group, all of this time You can't excuse that. There's no one, I don't care who you can pick him up from Harvard, pick him up from Yale, Ivy League, I don't care who it is, sit him right here. The numbers, they can't refute. And the impact on those numbers, they can't run away. Racism is alive and well. White supremacy is alive and well. And until it's attacked and met at every turn, these images, the criminalization will be used. Willie Horton will come up again. Super Predator will come up again. We will imitate it. We will propagate it ourselves, like you said, in our behavior, because we are looking at it as a norm, and there's not enough adults that's strong enough to be leaders to show that it is an error, that it is a lie. If you don't stand up, if they can't respect you, they're going to take on pop culture, and pop culture is genocide right now.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I think it's a great show. You know, I think you know, it's
3 minutes.
I think it shows. You know, we're not asking you to be a rigid follower of the Democratic Party, and we're not asking you to be a follower of the Republican Party. We are asking you to be critical thinkers and be free enough to say, you know what, I'm gonna look at both of these suspects, because the history shows me if nothing changes, and there's a reason why nothing changed. There's a reason why other groups can come and get more from this country. And we got to stop being jealous and being mad and start looking at what is the basis of that. And many of it is, I mean, think about it. Yeah, these people come and then they barely speak English. They have no real connections here, but yet they have connections internationally. Well, then let's get our connections internationally. They got connections to banking and financing internationally, because banks here aren't giving us money. All the statistics, I mean, family, come on. All the statistics show you that you're being warred on any level, whatever level you want to talk about. You want to talk about it banking. You want to talk about it health. You want to talk about it educationally. On every single level, we can just look to their statistics, not ours. You can look at their statistics and they'll tell you, oh, yeah, we're not giving you loans. Oh, yeah. Your babies are dying more. Oh, yeah. Your children are doing worse under white teachers than black. And that's also another statistic that they said that universities have run studies on and said, oh, yes, if a black child has a black teacher, they're more likely to go to college. This is what they're saying.
And so a white child.
And a white child also.
With a black teacher.
With a black teacher and a black doctor. But so these things that you hear us say, you think they're so pro this and angry this and angry that. No, we're just looking at statistics. The rest of society is ignoring it. And that's why it seems strange to you, because you're listening to the rest of society. They're leading you around by the nose, and they're telling you what's important and what's not. And they're not telling you what's important in your life. So family, just keep your head up. That's all I got to say about this. Yeah.
And final note, let's look at in the mirror and define who you are, and look at your political position. Let's take it all the way back. It's the only question you really have to ask yourself is, are you free or not? I'm saying no. I'm gonna admit it. I'm not free. I'm fighting to try to be free. I'm trying to be a free thinker. But I know that as I sit here right now, I am not free. And the question is, what must I do? What must I inspire to become free? And if voting is going to make me free, I'm in front of the line if it's going to make me free. But if you can't show me that it's going to help me to be free, and you're going to tell me freedom has to wait, and you're going to tell me I have to be patient after being in a country over 400 years or so, and I have to be so patient now to be free, when all the other people that he talk about, the groups, walk in here free. So if they can walk in free, what is hindering my freedom? I'm not going to be a victim. I'm a proactive person. I'm not a victim. I'm proactive. But I understand history, and I understand patterns, and I understand excuses, and I understand the level of commitment that's necessary for freedom. And I know the price for it. People died for it. People took bricks. People were bitten by dogs because they thought they were fighting for freedom, not just to vote. When you vote, you have to make it mean something. If it means something, do it. You haven't heard either one of us tell you who to vote for, who not to vote for. If it means something, do it. But it better lead to freedom, because that's the answer we seeking, and that's the answer your children are seeking, and that's the only thing that will satisfy or quench this thirst. It's freedom or death. That's our national anthem. Until next time, don't talk politics.